Okay, we're good? All right. We're good. Welcome to BUSD this evening for this special occasion. Cocoa and Fruity Pebbles cereal are introduced at the grocery stores. Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida opens. The first Starbucks opens at Pike's Place Market in Seattle. And Tom Eising starts working for Vallecito Union School District. The year 1971, and the average price of gas, 36 cents. Some of us remember that. Tom remembers. We're gathered here this evening to honor Tom Eising for 50 years of dedication and service to the students, families, and community of Vallecito Union. The school district recognized its 50th anniversary in 2021. 50 years is known as the Golden Anniversary, and it's traditionally symbolized by the precious metal gold. Now, Tom, I looked online and I read that gold represents beauty, strength, and is very resistant to corrosion. And I figure 1 out of 3 is not bad. There you go. So, in all seriousness, though, 50 years is an amazing accomplishment. And I'm happy to introduce our first guest speaker, Mark Dyken.
What a pleasure to be here. I've been a Tom Eising fan for a long time. He taught with my kids. As a basketball coach, I sat in this very gym and watched him and just absolutely admired him as a coach. So, and then got to serve on the board with him. So just, But I'm here to read a letter from Frank Driscoll. So, Frank writes, I am unable to attend Tom Eising's ceremony, and I would appreciate it if someone could include the following comments on my behalf. No. I served as the principal at Albert Michelson School when it was K-8, and also at Avery Middle School. In both cases, Tom was a teacher, coach, and athletic director. Kids are great judges of sincerity in adults. Middle school kids are especially good at such judgments. It was clear to the kids that Tom was sincerely interested in their success. For many students, the sports experience on Tom's teams was the high point of their middle school careers. This is reflected in the fact that over the years, every time I spoke to Tom, he seemed to mention a former student or player had just dropped by to see him. Besides having been a great coach, Tom is also an exceptional teacher, whose students benefited from his concern for both their learning and their personal well-being. To be a good teacher and also a coach takes a very heavy time commitment. Not only is time required for practice and games, but volunteers must be found for timekeeping, refereeing, announcing, transportation, and more. Every time I heard from Tom after I retired and still lived in Arnold, somewhere in the conversation was the question to the effect, are you available to ref a game on Friday? It'll be an easy one. Nothing could be more appropriate than naming the Avery Middle School Gym for Tom. My congratulations to Tom for this honor and to the Vallecito Union School District for choosing to honor him in this way. Frank Driscoll.
Tom, we've laminated this for you, and this is yours. Yes. And next, we would like to invite up Darlene Sanders.
Wow, 50 years of school service. I didn't realize Tom was so old. Dedicating the gym at Avery Middle School to Tom is a very well-deserved honor. Tom started teaching in VUSD in 1971 at the two-room schoolhouse in Murphys. In In 1973, we made the move to the new Albert Michelson School, where he taught for 21 years. And then in 1993, the move to the brand new Avery Middle School was made, where he taught for another 11 years before he retired from teaching, sort of. During his retirement, he returned to handle the homeschool program for 6th to 8th grades, stepped in as principal at all 3 schools when needed, served as interim principal at Michelson and again as interim principal at Hazel Fisher. But the reason he is being honored today is for the many years Tom has spent coaching and refereeing and as athletic director for 3 schools in VUSD. Starting with the early years at Murphy School, where he certainly left his mark, selecting school colors, Dodger blue and white. Really? And picking the school mascot, the Trojans, like in the University of Southern California Trojans. Over the years, Tom was one of the most loved, most respected, most dedicated coaches in Calaveras County. He had good relationships with all the coaches, but none more so than with John Beretta of Hazel Fisher, Dave Cosgrave from Mark Twain, and Mal Hall of Jackson. During his tenure of coaching both boys and girls basketball teams, Tom has coached and refereed over 1,000 games, which included not only the regular seasons, but tournaments such as the AMA tournament, the Tahoe tournament, and the VOSD tip-off tournament, which he implemented and managed. At the school level, Tom was best appreciated for his civics classes. In keeping with that, Tom led a leadership class and a student council at Avery. He helped with the top Trojan field trips and continued that program with the top Hawk Awards at Avery. Always finding a way to make school fun, he developed and ran the faculty 8th grade basketball games and the faculty 8th grade softball games at both Michelson and Avery. To quote one student, "It was cool that he also taught my mom." Lots of stories and laughs were shared because of that. He always had a way to make learning fun and encouraged us to look at things from different perspectives. I'm grateful to have been taught by someone who cared about each of his students so much. Tom ran all these activities, coaching basketball, and one year even coaching AMA ponytail softball, all after a full day of teaching. Amazing. What are some of the things I remember about Tom? It is amazing what all he could and did accomplish. But he could never get money from tournaments turned in or get his grades turned in on time without the nagging from the efficient, sweet, old school secretary. And don't get me started on the toilet seat, which he could never put down, which was common to be seen from the front door of the school office. I remember during the games how he would run up and down the sidelines along with his players on the court. And sometimes he would jump out onto the court in excitement or in despair. And one time it garnered him a technical foul. And during the timeouts, he could never get his team out of the huddle and back on the court at the buzzer. Sometimes it would take 1 or 2 whistle blows from the refs. I even remembering the ref handing the ball to the opposing team or setting it down at mid-court and the game starting up while Tom's team was still in the huddle. Recently, I went to a basketball game in which my 2 great-granddaughters were playing for Mark Twain. To my delight, when I arrived, I saw that the visiting team was the Michelson Trojans and their head coach was Ginger Ward Fleck, one of Tom's former basketball players. I was so amused watching Ginger running up and down the sidelines, out on the court, and she could never get her team back on the quarter. When I talked to her about it after the game, her comment was, "I learned from the best."
So next up, we'd like to invite Steve Gazzetta up. Say a few words.
I talked with Tom for almost 30 years, and the first time I met him, I knew he had a flaw. Frank Driscoll, after I was interviewed, took me on a tour of the school, and when we went by Tom's room, he was sitting at his desk, but I don't remember Tom. I just remember this Dodger banner, like it was a bulletin board. And I'm sure the Schultzes and the Sanders would agree, that was on his wall. I want to tell you a couple of stories. One story I want to tell you is, it kind of gives you an idea of, gives you a perspective of Tom at the school. We were opening the school, I think it was 1993, and we had worked really hard to make it a smooth transition. The kids were coming from two different schools, and we had worked very hard to make that first day a really fun day for the kids. They were going to travel to their different classes, so we had spent a long period of time divvying kids up, making sure the classes they were going into were balanced and they were in the appropriate class. And so, got here that day, and I was missing my class list. I tore my classroom apart. I went back out, I tore my car apart, knowing that this was going to be a disaster. 10 minutes to go. Tom walks in with a big smile on his face, and he goes, "Were you looking for these?" That was 29 years ago. And I've been waiting for revenge ever since. Just kidding. But it was kind of a harbinger of things to come. And the next story I wanted to tell you about was Tom had this great idea that we were going to paint a hawk in the middle of the gym here. And got student council all excited about it, and we went ahead and he contracted and had it painted. It was beautiful. And our head of maintenance was John Beretta at the time, part of the heart and soul of this school when we began. And at the end of the day, I went in and asked John, "How's it going?" He goes, "It's not drying." Came in early the next day. John was there, the hair dryer. "How's it going, John?" He goes, "Not drying." Tom was distraught, and I hardly ever miss a chance to poke fun at him. But he was so upset, I couldn't pick on him. 5 days later, the hawk was gone. It never dried and had to be scraped off the floor. But there's a happy ending to this. We decided to put the hawk on the wall. So that's how the hawk ended up there. Hold on, let me grab my water real quick because I won't be able to talk to you. So, for Tom, it was always all about the kids and making the gym kind of special. It was all about the kids. Now, I was thinking about that, and you don't have basketball games without practices. So he had probably somewhere in the neighborhood between 2,000 and 3,000 practices during that time. And not only that, but there were all kinds of other things that were involved in the basketball. He coached both boys and girls, and I figured there was probably 10 to 15 basketball games per group per year. So an incredible number of kids also benefited from this. I figured out that there's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 kids that were on his team over the years. And one of the things that basketball was a hook for kids. They really enjoyed coming to school when they were looking forward to a Thursday basketball game or something like that. Well, basketball was only part of it. He did, we used to do dances, and we would do 4 dances a year. So I figured he was in the neighborhood of something like 120 dances. And Tom attended every dance. And not only did he attend the dances, but he made sure that they were decorated, and we had people at the door collecting money, and you had kids, or we had a DJ that was doing the music. At least at the end we had DJs. Otherwise we would have kids bring in their own music. So Tom would be here before the dance, and he would wait until the dance every kid had been picked up. And I know for a fact, some kids were picked up after midnight. Our dances would go from 7 to 10, and sometimes Tom didn't leave until after midnight. One of the things that we would have associated with basketball, we would have tournaments. And our tournaments would involve teams from 3 different counties. And there were probably 20 to 30 games in each tournament. And I can still see Darlene Sanders sitting at the score table, and Gloria Kelly sitting at the scorer's table, and the place would just be filled with people and just be rocking. And it was Tom's responsibility to organize all that stuff. And one of the things that would happen is that in organizing them, you needed not only scorers and you needed people at the door, you also needed referees. And at about 6:45 every Sunday night, for many, many years, I would get a call. And he would say, "Hey, how was your weekend? Did you do anything fun?" And then he'd probably get around to, "And I need you Tuesday, and I need you Thursday." And it's not that he wasn't appreciative, because he always would thank me afterwards. And on one particular assembly that we had, he honored me in front of the entire school. And gave me a plaque. And it says, in sincere appreciation to Steve Gazzetta for 20 years of questionable referee. Coaches and players that have seen me referee, questionable was probably a very generous adjective. But one of the things that I think it showed, it was that we had a really fun environment at this school. And Tom was a big part of the fun environment. Now, Darlene mentioned that when Tom retired, he really didn't retire. And she alluded to the fact that he was principal at both schools. He was on our school board. He did Homeschool Academy. One of his students was our county spelling champion, which was kind of amazing coming out of homeschool. and to Tom's credit. So, one of the things that, I lost this. And one of the things Darlene didn't mention is that for the entire time Tom's been retired, he's been refereeing 5th grade basketball. And, you know, I'm not sure how old Tom is. He must be close to 85. But 3 weeks ago, he was running up and down the court at Hazel Fisher refereeing 5th grade basketball. And when you watch Tom referee basketball, he calls the foul on a 5th grader, and then he explains what the foul was. In other words, so for the whole time he's been retired, he's still coaching kids, which is amazing. So, I think that really appropriate to thank you as a community member and as a staff member for making this really a successful place, and for the kids in this community, what you did for the kids in this community to be kind of immortalized by naming the gym after you. Those efforts won't be forgotten. So thank you all.
So next up, we'd like to invite Ed Martin.
Well, Steve said that Darlene stole his thunder, so he stole some of mine. I forgot about the painted hawk. That was pretty awesome. It was about an inch thick, by the way. It was an inch thick. The kids would have tripped over it. Anyway, there it is right there. I wanted to start out by, they said so many nice things about him, and there are a lot of nice things to say. My first remembrance of Tom, I hadn't met him yet. I was a new teacher at Hazel Fisher. I hadn't met anybody yet. I went into a meeting with my principal, Donna Bell, who most of you will remember. She's a great lady, very perky. And I was sitting there, and she had a checklist, and I was sitting there talking to her, and she's like, well, Ed, can you coach? And I'm like, well, maybe. I played, so I'll try coaching. She checks the box. And then she said, can you do the yearbook? And I'm like, well, I just got out of journalism. I'll do the yearbook. She checks. And so she goes, can you be the AD? And I'm like, well, that sounds easy. Sure, I can do that. Not easy. She checked the box and she goes, good. It looks like we have our Hazel Fisher Tom Eising. And I'm like, okay, what's a Tom Eising? And so a couple of weeks later, we were having our first district-wide meeting, and is where I found out what a Tom Eising was. The door opens, and here comes the Michelson staff walking into the door. I swear they were walking in slow motion. It was like the start of Baywatch. They were so good looking. I think they might have rented a fan that was blowing. Their hair was blowing. And right in the middle of them was this dude. I guess the closest thing I could say, he reminded me of a young George Clooney. So picture George Clooney walking next to like Patty Johnson and Patty Schultz and Steve Gazette and Mary Matthews, and well, picture that. Their hair was blowing. So they walk in and sit down. They're all super confident. I was up at Hazel Fisher. We had a great staff too, but I had heard about these Michelson people, and there they were in all their glory. And so there they were, and the thing probably that bugged me the most about Tom when he walked in was he was wearing shorts, and I was like, Jesus, I hear about this guy that's so awesome all the time. He's got great legs as well. That sucked. Anyway, so Tom was at, oh, I forgot I wanted to mention one more thing about my talk with Dawn and Bell at first she checked me off and said, you're our Hazel Fisher, Tom Eising. I didn't know who one was, but she also, when I said, what's a Tom Eising, she actually told me. And she said, the first thing she said was, well, he taught in a one-room schoolhouse. So I'm immediately picturing Half Pint from Little House on the Prairie. You know, like, that's not too scary. I think I can do that. Okay? Then she said, well, he's a history teacher. And I'm like, now I'm picturing, I don't know why, but I'm picturing Abraham Lincoln. He wasn't a history teacher, but, you know, stovepipe hat. Then she said, he's tough. Oh, he's tough. And now I'm picturing Sidney Poitier in Blackboard Jungle. So I'm like, oh, ooh, I gotta be tougher. She goes, but he's super nice too. So now I'm picturing Sidney Poitier in To Sir With Love. So I'm like, man, this guy's all over the place here. And the last thing she said was, well, he's also a great basketball coach. His girls team just won the county championship. Now I'm picturing John Wooden. So I got this whistle around Half Pint's neck, and I don't know what it had going, but Tom was a lot of things there, and they were all pretty good, actually. You know, and a couple of people mentioned, you know, he coached both my daughters. He had them in class. They loved to have him as a coach and a teacher. And, you know, I do have one thing, and it's been talked about already, so I think that maybe if they put up a sign that says Tom Eising Gymnasium, it probably should have an asterisk at the end of that, because as we know, as a Dodger fan, that might be a disqualifying factor to get a gym in Northern California named after you. Not sure. The board might have to relook at this a little bit here. But anyway, seriously, he's a great, it's already been said, but he's a great community member. No kidding, he does everything. He was a great teacher and coach. I remember another thing, sorry, I just keep remembering things. No, it's good. I was in school one day and I was listening to people in the office talk, and like, oh my God, the new interim principal of it, Hazel Fisher, is so great. And I started listening, and I'm like, wow, who could this be? Who could this Superman be? And they were like, and they were talking, they were saying the students love him, the staff loves him, and I finally had to interrupt and go, well, who is this God? And they go, Tom Eising. I almost mouthed it with him. I already probably knew who it was. But he just won't stop. And then you know, years later, he's on the school board, which, as we know, can be a thankless job, a very hard job. And he did that for years, and he's just a great community member, and I can't think of anybody better to have this facility named after him. So Tom, congratulations.
Right, so we're actually going off script. We have a special request from a Todd Eising to say a few words.
There's nothing but nice things about my dad. Actually, it was not planning on saying anything because I know the school board was trying to get going on schedule, but you can't not say anything. So,
we used to do this every 50 years.
I know, right? Every 50 years. So, you guys heard a lot about my dad. One thing is, he's my stepdad. So, when he first met me, I think I might have been, to put it nicely, was a little bit of a punk. So, dating my mom, a little story here, I think I might have spit on the floor, threw peas on the floor, I don't know what I did, but my mom wasn't around, and I think I went airborne into the bedroom. And so, when Mom came home, she walks in and is trying to figure out what's going on, and I said, you know what, I think I love him. And so, sorry, just what I needed for a father. And it got better from there. For me, my whole life was watching a roll-on. My real last name is Kennedy. 2nd grade, so when I was in 1st grade, we moved up here. I think Jen O'Callaghan was my teacher for a couple weeks. So 1st grade was over, I'm in 2nd grade. I tell my teacher, I forget who it was, Georgia Solomon, second grade, I want to change my last name. So my real last name is Kennedy. So she's like, whoa, hold on a second. You can't just do that. We need to go to the principal's office. We need to talk. I called him in the office, and my last name is Eising. My children's last name is Eising. And I could not be prouder to have the last name Eising. As a second grader, I recognized what all you guys have seen for years. Well, I think when I got thrown in my room airborne, I recognized what you guys had seen for years. But to the point where I changed my name. So I grew up with a coach. He coached me. He's coached everybody. He's not only done coaching with sports. He's been student body, student council. He's done a ton of different things, not just with that. He's been on the athletic director. He's been on the school board. He's been principal. He's been homeschool teacher. I've gone away, gone to college, doing my career. He's still doing this, right? I'm almost retiring soon. He's still doing this. What are you doing? You're on the school. What are you doing? Like, seriously. It's just to live, you know, to go through as somebody who got to be blessed by a father who wasn't my father and be able to watch him as a role model. I grew up with having to live up to that for one, which sucked. But looking back, he knew I was in trouble before I did. But being able to see that it never got old to hear, your dad is my favorite teacher. Your dad is my favorite coach. Your dad. I would introduce myself. They'd hear the last name. They knew where I was from. I know. Go ahead, finish. Your last name is Tom. Your dad. Okay, go ahead, finish. I know what it is. Your dad is my favorite teacher, my favorite coach. It got to a point where I got proud. I was proud to be able to say my last name. I chose as a second grader, I want this last name. I knew what I had with my father. But fast forwarding and looking back, I knew as a kid, as a little first grader, that that's the name I wanted. That's the name I wanted to be part of. Looking back, I am so happy and so proud to be able to say, I'm Todd Eising. My dad's, go ahead, I know. The last name, go ahead. He's your favorite teacher. He's your favorite, he's great. Hearing everything you guys are saying about him is, yeah, of course. Now, I can tell you the stories where, you know, he grounded me for no reason. I didn't get to go to Lake Tahoe, you know, for whatever reason. Now, there's all those stories, but they're jokes. They're just fun jokes about, oh, he's not perfect, but really, I couldn't have had a more perfect dad, a more perfect role model. And I'm just so happy that you guys are all here to let him know how much he means to you guys, because that's how much he means to me. And so thank you for letting me talk. Appreciate it.
All right, Tom, look out because they're ganging up on you here at the end. We are inviting up Ginger Fleck and Josh O'Gene here at the end.
Tom Eising, a teacher, coach, mentor, board member, athletic director, administrator, comedian, philosopher, founding staff member of Michelson and Avery Middle School, and most importantly, an incredibly kind friend. Tom ran the gamut of this district with all the jobs he had and all the students, educators, and staff he helped along the way. He is otherwise known as the Swiss Army knife of Vallecito Union School District. In 1971, Tom Eising began his career in Calaveras County at the Murphy's Grammar School with multiple grades where he taught.
When Hazel Fisher and Michelson opened, Tom was one of the founding staff members at Michelson. At this time, there was much to do: setting new schedules, adding new teachers, developing a school culture, and a school climate.
And Josh, but you forgot one of Tom's most important decisions. Well, the scuttlebutt around the water cooler is that Tom is the one responsible for choosing blue and white as Michelson's colors.
So how can that be relevant?
Well, because, Dodgers! Tom and I are the only Dodger fans in Calaveras County. He's responsible for that blue and white. Don't let him fool you.
Okay then. Once he landed at Michelson, teaching 8th grade and coaching basketball, Tom stayed and served the Murphys community for over 30 years. At this time, he also landed his soulmate, Lynn, who served as Michelson school secretary, always keeping Tom in line.
And I have a story about Lynn and Tom. The story goes that one day, he explained to his 8th grade students that he was crazy about this woman named Lynn. He asked the students whether or not he should propose. And of course, the kids who knew them both enthusiastically agreed that they should marry.
Thanks, Ginger. But did you know that Tom was also instrumental in opening up the Avery Middle School? In 1993, he transferred from Michelson into the new Avery Middle School and continued being a teacher leader at the new site. While at Avery, Tom taught math, coached basketball, ran the leadership team, and even served as principal.
And Josh, in fact, he loved the Dodgers so much that he wanted the Avery Hawks to be blue and white too.
So why are they maroon and white?
Have you ever seen a blue and white hawk?
Not recently. But I do have a vivid memory of being in Tom's 8th grade class at Michelson. The one memory that stands out to me was when Mr. Eising would have class meetings. In the 80s, as many of you know, schools didn't address the emotional side of their students nearly as much as we do now. However, Tom was ahead of the game in this. In these meetings, each student had the opportunity to talk about troubles and also greatness and work out any problems they may have had. What's amazing about this is at Michelson, we're still doing class meetings. Thanks, Tom.
And I have a vivid memory too of Tom as my amazing basketball coach and teacher. He was a positive male role model in my life when I needed it the most. In fact, Tom related to the kids who kept their noses clean and worked hard in school so that they could get to some of the extracurricular activities afterwards. He helped a lot of kids enjoy going to school more. Well, it worked for me. I've come full circle, Tom. I'm now coaching basketball, serving as athletic director, and teaching in the very room where you taught me. So thank you, Tom, for being such an inspiration to not only me, but to us all.
Tom, congratulations on an amazing 50 years. We couldn't think of a more deserving man to dedicate the Avery Middle School to. Thanks, Tom.
So Tom, we're going to bring you up, and we're going to give you this. This is a replica of what is going to be a placard that we're going to be putting at the front of the gym out here in dedication and honor for this. So we want to give you that, and then we're going to give you the floor to kind of wrap us up.
After all those remarks and remembrances, this is going to really bore you to death, right? But I'm going to say it the way I wrote it anyway. First off, I'd like to thank the USD administration for putting this afternoon, almost early evening, together now so honored and deeply humbled. A special thank you to Sue Beretta and Jan Schultz for making the proposal, coming up with this proposal, and to Jason Beretta for writing it up for the presentation to the school board. A very big thank you to Darlene, Steve, Ed, Mark, Josh, Ginger, for their mostly kind words. Finally, I can't say this, I'm just overwhelmed. A huge thank you for all of you for sharing this moment with me. I'm just flabbergasted. Thank you so much. So Sunday, I was bike riding with my close friend Dave Gaino, and he asked me if I was going to have any words of wisdom for the audience. I said no, that I was just going to talk about some things that made me stay in education 50 years. And in his insightful way, David said, a whole lot of us would like to know the answer to that question. So in giving some additional thought to that question, I'd like to share with you some of those people and situations that made me spend so many years in VUSD. There were no particular order or importance, but there are 20 of literally thousands. Now, it doesn't happen every day, but students would thank me as they left my classroom for a particularly good lesson or an athletic practice. Those little moments stay with you forever as a teacher. Having Rick McTagg and John Beretta at virtually every practice and game with me for years and years, they made my job so much easier. To a young man named Israel Montoya, who joined me as a 20-year-old youngster interested in coaching and staying at Michelson for 5 years, where he eventually became a 7th grade boys and girls coach. Seeing Jay Bookie every morning for 15 minutes before the rest of the teachers arrived to talk about our families and school, and for me to hear about Banta Elementary. Of Jay's previous teaching assignment. Other than Jay, I think I know more about Banta Elementary than anyone else in Calaveras County, with maybe the exception of Ed Martin. Getting handwritten letters and notes from students at graduation time, thanking me for their 8th grade year. One time after going to the state middle school conference where Steve Gazzetta and I were telling each other that it felt like we were teaching in Mayberry after listening to other middle school teachers' trials and tribulations at their middle schools. It was telling Mike Chimente one time, who was our superintendent, that I was struggling to do athletic director, coach, activities director, student council, and oh yeah, try and teach, without some extra time during the school day, and him replying, I see that you'll get a prep period. It was being invited to join a circle dance with one of my 8th grade girls teams at their graduation dance to our theme song that year, Bop by Dan Seals. It was being invited to Richard Hogan to sit at the head table with his family when Chico State welcomed him into the Chico State Athletic Hall of Fame. It was the way student leaders worked so hard and unselfishly in student council to make Avery Middle School a better place for everyone. It was parents thanking me for refereeing their child's 5th grade basketball game. It was working with Susan Singleton, Mark Dyken, Tom Pratt, and a former student, Sarah Wilson, on the VUSD board when their goals were to make schools the best that they could and keep our kids safe. I never worked with more dedicated people. It's my biggest regret in 50 years leading them, and our superintendent, Tom Hoskins. It was Margaret Gleason, Lynn Eising, and Gretchen McReynolds leading me by the nose as interim principal at Hazel Fisher and Michelson School. And Darlene just leading me for 30 years. It was being the object of a pie throwing contest after our school won a reading challenge at Hazel Fisher School. It was having Patty Johnson, Patty Schultz, Steve Gazzetta, and later Kathy Davey as teaching partners for 20 years. They were fun, dedicated teachers who made each day a joy for me as well as their students. It was Kathy Davies rounding up brooms for teaching Quidditch, and Patty Schultz for taking the hit song "We Didn't Start the Fire" by Billy Joel and turning it into an innovative writing and discussion assignment. I admired their creativity so much. It was principals like Frank Briscoe, which we talked about earlier, and Rick Frost. They gave me extra help with after-school activities, even though Frank once referred to me as adult. I had to look that up. It's not very flattering. It was Mel Hall from Jackson, Rick Sirocco and Dave Cosgrave from Mark Twain, and Bill Vonnick from Curtis Creek, whom I learned so much about coaching 8th grade boys and girls. It was having custodians and maintenance people like John Beretta, Kurt Ernst, Raymond Corley, tirelessly setting up and taking down chairs for tournaments, rallies, graduations, without ever complaining once, at least to me. It was a timeout in a championship 8th grade girls tournament game when we had given up a 20-point lead down to 4 when I made a panic timeout and berated the girls for losing their focus. As we left the huddle, Jana Nadler, our point guard, grabbed me by the arm and turned to me and said, "Don't worry, Mr. Eising, it's in the bag." Who won? It was a Hazel Fisher kindergarten kid telling me in front of the entire Hazel Fisher Christmas program crowd, "You're not Santa, you're Mr. Eising." Despite my Santa Claus costume that I thought had hid my identity. These items do not begin to scratch as to why I look forward to coming to school. But most importantly, it always came back to the kids. They motivated me, they kept me young, and left a lasting impression that I would never forget. It was a wonderful 50 years working in 3 terrific schools with committed, dedicated, caring staff and administrators. A huge thank you to my wonderful wife and sons who supported me in my school decisions all these 50 years. And once again, to all of you who have come here this afternoon, I'm so deeply honored and grateful. Thank you very much.
Here. Tom, if you want, there's a board meeting just waiting for you. Come on over and boy, what fun. But no, thank you everybody.